However, even with such mutual help among refugees, they still can't maintain basic survival because they're just too poor. Seeing this situation, Tom and Jim Casey finally couldn't take it anymore. They decided to stand up and represent all refugees, to negotiate with landlords and capitalists, to fight for better wages and formal employment contracts on behalf of everyone. But they clashed fiercely with the police. Jim Casey was taken away and detained for a while as punishment. Next is the third part of the novel. We see Tom gaining a deeper understanding of how tough the situation is. And he learned how the wealthy in California are prepared to deal with these poor, suffering refugees. The plantation owners and farmers in California clearly have a lot of ripe fruits and vegetables that need picking, but they deliberately hire twice as many job seekers as needed just to push wages down to the minimum, making workers hate each other over a little pay. If workers try to unite and strike, they call the police to arrest the leader. Anyone who incites rebellion among workers is blacklisted and can never find work again. They exploit the vulnerability of most people. Pressured by family and livelihood, workers easily give in. The Joad family has fallen into financial hardship again. Led by their mother, they bid farewell to friends in the refugee camp and head to a peach orchard 35 miles away. When they arrive, they find it's already crowded with refugees, and the pay for picking a basket of peaches is a pitiful 5 cents. So what? They have no choice. The whole family works hard. After a whole day, they only earned $1 total. Not even enough for a full meal. With so many peaches in the orchard, they could at least satisfy their hunger, right? But that's absolutely impossible because guards patrol the orchard all night to prevent refugees from stealing fruit. Faced with such humiliation, Tom once again thinks that they must unite all poor people to act together. Only then will they have a glimmer of hope. He also meets Jim Casey again, who has been released. And Casey says, I only understood the truth after I went to prison. The people in prison are all good folks. They turn bad simply because they're too poor and need to survive. Both are outraged, so they discuss planning an uprising among the refugees. Unexpectedly, their conversation was overheard by the police in the chaos. In the chaos, Jim Casey was killed by the cops. Tom avenged his friend by killing that policeman, then fled on the run. Now the story enters its most tense phase. Tom's fate is heart-wrenching. However, along with danger and suspense, there's also hope. This hope comes from the mother, who tries everything to find hiding spots for Tom and bring him food. Later, the news leaked out, and the police began searching everywhere. Mother Joad secretly met with Tom and told him, "You can't come home anymore." Tom told his mother, "We gotta place our hope in folks who are as hungry as we are." He always remembered what Jim Casey said, "A person's soul is just a small part of a great soul. The human soul, even in the wilderness, seeks a sense of belonging to a whole." Mom, I'm leaving now, but I'll be hidden in the shadows everywhere. No matter where you look, you'll see me. Mm. Wherever there are hungry people fighting for food, I'll be there. Wherever there are police beating people, I'll be there. Now, Tom sets off alone on a path to unite poor farmers in resistance. It can be said they have no chance of winning, yet the dialogue between mother and son, facing separation, has a power that's almost desperate. After Tom left, the novel enters its final phase. Disasters continue to press in. These poor refugees face ongoing man-made disasters, and natural disasters strike again. California enters the rainy season. The rain gets heavier, eventually causing floods. Water overflowed from the roads into the fields. In the refugee shacks, on wet haystacks, an old man curled up in a corner and died. Women, suffering from pneumonia, gasped as they gave birth. Hunger and fear gradually brewed into anger. Men planned to go out and steal. The Joad family's temporary shelter was also flooded. Led by the mother, the whole family searched. for a temporary shelter from the rain. At the end of the novel, another heavy rain fell. The Joads were penniless, and even their food was gone. They struggled through the rain and took shelter in an empty barn. More tragically, Rose of Sharon gave birth prematurely. The baby didn't survive. The family put the dead infant in a small coffin, which was soon swept away by the flood before they could grieve. In that barn, they encountered a man starving to death and a little boy. The little boy cried out desperately, "Dad is starving to death." Truly, seeing this, Mother looked at Rose of Sharon, then at the man. The two women shared a silent understanding. Rose of Sharon had already understood Mother's intention. The final scene of the novel is Rose of Sharon asking everyone else to stand outside the barn. Then she starts to undo her clothes to nurse the man. The man widened his eyes in surprise, slowly shaking his head, but Rose of Sharon pulled his head close, stroked his hair like a baby, and said, "Eat, you need to eat a little." As she spoke, she revealed a holy and mysterious smile. The novel ends with this profound scene. Although the book's title has the word grapes, there's no sweetness in it. Instead, it's full of bitterness, disasters, and pain. The novel, represented by the Joad family, depicts the Great Migration in America during the 1930s. In this dark period of history, tens of thousands of farmers hope to rely on their own efforts to earn due rewards, find work, land, dignity, and a future, thereby realizing their American dream. Steinbeck borrowed the structure of the Old Testament Exodus in the novel, with the three parts, drought, journey, and California, corresponding to the three parts of Exodus, suffering, exodus, and settlement, and the promised land. California was the farmer's dream of a land flowing with milk and honey. However, in the end, the Joad family was helpless in the flood, nearly despairing. Their American dream was undoubtedly shattered. Before writing The Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck mainly wrote some short stories and novellas, including masterpieces like Of Mice and Men that have lasting influence. But in the autumn of 1937, he wandered with Oklahoma farmers to California, personally participating in labor. He was deeply shaken by this experience, saying, "There are 5,000 households on the verge of starvation." Faced with such tragic facts, he felt that the books he had written before were utterly shoddy and insignificant. Thus, he quickly wrote The Grapes of Wrath to give meaning to this suffering through the form of a novel. In the novel, the profound suffering of the farmers stems from oppression. Oklahoma farmers lost their land and assets and were forced into family exile, all because of oppression. The farmers' houses were bulldozed by tractors sent by banks and landlords, forcing them to leave their homes and travel on Route 66. On the road, they were virtually at the mercy of others. Police drove them away arbitrarily, and merchants unscrupulously exploited them. After finally reaching California, they faced even harsher oppression. The plantation owners there simply wouldn't give them a way to survive. Just like the landlords in Oklahoma, they only cared about their own interests. While depicting oppression, Steinbeck also portrays the simple virtues of the oppressed. Although these virtues couldn't shield them from the disasters they faced, against the backdrop of suffering, they displayed a moving charm. In the book, most members of the Joad family, the protagonists, have their shining moments. For example, when Grandpa passed away, Grandma showed dignity and optimism. When trapped by the flood, Rose of Sharon displayed Madonna-like compassion. In the novel, the most detailed and fully developed characters are Mother and Tom, who also represent the most prominent virtues. Mother's virtue is mainly shown in her protection of the family. In Mother's view, no one is destined to be alone. While protecting her own family, she could also share hardships with other refugees, care for the poor, and cook for all the refugee children. Her love could be extended to others. Tom's virtue, on the other hand, is shown through his vision for all poor farmers. He had spent a long time in prison, but he had extraordinary experiences, was thoughtful, and possessed a firm moral conviction, which destined him not to live an ordinary life day after day. Quickly, Tom achieved personal growth through his friend Jim Casey and the various hardships during his journey. When he found work in the refugee camp, he realized that his gain meant someone else lost a job, and thus their family would lose a crucial source of income. Therefore, he believed that if the poor only cared for themselves, there would be no way out unless they united, as Jim Casey said, merging individual souls into the collective soul. So Tom left his homeland and joined the revolutionary struggle to improve the fate of farmers. In it, the reason the Grapes of Wrath has moved countless people also lies in its profound artistic power. For example, Steinbeck employed many symbols. First, the novel begins by describing a turtle crossing the road. This turtle struggles to crawl with its shell. It encountered a slope, then a bump, then a raised roadbed, and at one point a red ant crawled into its shell and was crushed to death by its body and legs. And another wild oat got dragged along by it. A woman driving a car came by and carefully detoured around it to avoid hitting it. But immediately after, a young man driving a truck deliberately ran over the turtle. His wheels scraped the edge of the turtle's shell, pushing it off the road. The turtle landed upside down, struggled for a while, then righted itself and kept crawling. Coincidentally, Tom, just released from prison, passed by. He picked up the turtle, wrapped it in his clothes, and took it away. Finally, he released the turtle, which stubbornly continued crawling southwest. This turtle symbolizes all the wandering refugee families in the book. They too have coarse legs and mud-caked feet. They carry all their belongings on the road, burdened heavily, constantly facing harassment and obstacles. Exposed to sun and rain, when encountering threats, they retract their heads and limbs into their shells, just like families huddling together in a wagon to endure hardships. What becomes of their fate? It depends entirely on whether others choose kindness or seek their demise. They can only rely on unity to overcome difficulties, survive, and improve their odds. Tom taking the turtle reveals the novel's metaphor. Tom merging with the turtle, he embraces the fate of the laboring masses as his own. The second symbol is the Grapes of Wrath from the book's title. Chapter 25 directly addresses these wrathful grapes. California had a grape superharvest, but to maintain high prices, capitalists chose to cut vines and bury ripe grapes to rot in the earth. Similarly, they piled oranges, doused them with oil, and burned them, used coffee as ship fuel, burned corn for warmth, dumped potatoes into rivers, slaughtered pigs and buried them on site. Steinbeck wrote that such acts ignited fury in hungry refugees' eyes, the grapes of wrath, filling souls, growing there, ripening for harvest. To refugees, grapes symbolized California's fertile land and their hopes, but later, these grapes became symbols of refugees' anger. To Steinbeck, anger meant hope. As floodwaters trapped people, despairing women silently watched men gather. When they saw the fear on the men's faces turn to anger, they breathed a sigh of relief. Because the women knew the men hadn't given up. As long as there was anger, hope wouldn't perish. Though the men's anger brought hope to the women, from the Great Depression to the famine, the refugees' pastoral American dream was ultimately doomed to fail. Their tragic fate of displacement couldn't be blamed on any specific individuals, only attributed to the massive changes of the era. At that time, American agriculture was transitioning to industrial production. Refugees seeking livelihoods could no longer cling to the land, but were forced into industrial society. In fact, as time passed, the turbulent history depicted in the Grapes of Wrath gradually faded, and its influence in reflecting social reality weakened. Yet its classic artistic value has only grown. People won't forget The immortal words Steinbeck wrote with compassionate strokes for the suffering souls of that grand era. Well, this concludes our interpretation of the novel The Grapes of Wrath. The listening notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.